Good morning, everybody. Tommy Jordan here. It is December the 6th, 2020. We're currently right at that post Thanksgiving, a little bit of surge in COVID. Our state just crossed 5,000 cases per day and 6,000 cases per day in the same week. Um, Most of you know I'm very much not a fan of Governor Cooper's mandates and the ways that I think he's overreaching in terms of applying things. But I want to back up a minute and keep a few things in perspective. Um, One of the biggest numbers that I worry about, I look at, and I'm a county commissioner and I'm on the board of health. So, and I talk to our health director, our director of nursing, our all kinds of people throughout the week, and just ask questions, and they send me reports all week long, and they send it to all of us. It's just that I'm interested in this, so I pay attention. And the thing that I need people to understand, or I want people to understand, is that there is a real threat. This is going to get worse very quickly, especially right now. Thanksgiving was not a joke. There was a surge. If you look at the case numbers for hospitalizations due to COVID around the 4th to 5th of December, right on up to now, I mean, it's just, it spiked a lot. That's directly in correlation to post-Thanksgiving people that are have gotten infected via travel or family members. Keep in mind, I still understand that COVID is, for the most part, a treatable condition. I'm 43, I'm healthy. If I get COVID, I'll probably be down for a couple of days. I have no underlying conditions, and I'll be back to work in a week. It's not a big deal for me. It's not a big deal for most of you. That's fine. I understand that. And I agree with that. It is a big deal for the elderly. Am I elderly? No. Should I have to stay home every day and wear a mask everywhere I stinking go because I'm not elderly? No, I shouldn't. But there comes a fine line between what you have the right to do and what you should do. And I'm going to try to put it into a perspective as to why. Forget what Cooper's saying. Forget what Dr. Mandy Cohen says. Just look at numbers. And in my specific, the way I do it, the number I look at that scares me the most, or that I want to monitor the most, is hospital bed capacity. Okay, we're currently operating under a surge mentality. Most of you don't know what that means. You've seen the surge percentages or surge numbers. What that means is, way back in March, basically every hospital in this state and others too started planning, because they were told you're liable to get hit with an unprecedented number of patients with flu-like symptoms, and maybe this hospital, for example, has enough beds to treat 50 people. Maybe that's that hospital's thing, and 50 people is a lot for that community, so that's plenty fine. Well, now hospitals have shifted to what's called surge capacity, which means if it's not an important procedure, if it's a knee replacement or grandma just wants to have that wart removed, yeah, it's not happening. Hospitals way back in March, April, May, June, all throughout then, and up to and until now, have been reorganizing their structures, their beds, their patient areas. They've been increasing their surge capacity. In other words, planning for parts of the hospital that didn't always have to deal with flu-like patients and ventilator systems and O2 systems, converting those to support that. Okay, so way back in the beginning when this started, our hospitals reformatted and planned for a surge. And that's a number that we keep hearing a lot, is that we're at 30% of surge capacity. Keep in mind, that means the hospitals are already over 100% of their normal capacity. They had planned for 50 beds. I know our hospital here, if I'm not mistaken, Atrium reorganized something like 178 beds. Like they moved and arranged a lot of stuff to prepare for more COVID patients, not more births, not more gunshot wounds. They did the best they could to lay out the hospital in such a way that it's ready for these patients. And so every hospital, every office that can do that has done this. They're prepared as they can be. So keep in mind, just as a layperson, when you see we're at 30% of capacity, That's 30% of our surge capacity. That means, keep in mind, all the hospitals have already gotten ready, and now at a state level, we're at X percentage of surge. And the last time I looked, the number here was around 20%, 22%. That's a good number. When you think about it, that means 78% of our hospital COVID capacity is still available. That's a good number. That's a good number to have. That's a good feeling. Our hospitals are only operating at 20 to 25%. Remember, taken as a whole, not all hospitals. Some hospitals are way higher. But our hospital system in this state is ready to handle more COVID. That's good. But there's going to be a point, if we're not careful, where that's going to stop being the case. Look at California. As of last week, they were at 85% of surge capacity. That's a scary number. If we hit 75% of surge capacity, to you guys, that's a statistic on paper. The reality is, that's gurneys in hallways. That's COVID patients being treated in hallways for days because there's no bed for them. That hospital didn't have enough beds. They didn't have enough beds back in April, and even after they shuffled things around, they don't have enough beds in November. They sure as hell won't have them in December. They aren't building wings. They're doing the best they can to operate the best way they know how. Normally, if this were a normal situation and it were an isolated incident, a hospital, and I'll use our own here, Atrium, let's say it can serve 100 COVID patients. That's a big number. If this COVID thing were isolated to us, that hospital would simply go, oh my God, there's a big patient load coming. They would call some nearby hospitals, nearby counties, maybe even nearby states, and recruit some doctors and some nurses to come work while that surge was going on. That's the way hospitals normally do that. It's basically temp staffing, just like all businesses do. Hey, we're having a busy season. We bring in some extra help, then they go home. That's not an option right now in the United States. Every hospital is at capacity. Every hospital is dealing with surges. So there is no one to call and say, I need more nurses. I need more doctors. It takes 8 years to make a doctor. It takes 8 years to grow one. And so you can't just simply go, I need more doctors, and 10 show up. Here at the local level, we have doctors doing things that they had forgotten how to do because they haven't had to do this stuff in 5 and 6 years. They're specialists in their fields. Maybe it's a cardiothoracic surgeon, I don't know. And now he's having to do things that he hasn't done since medical school because that's not what he went to school for. They're being retasked to deal with COVID stuff. The big fear is hospital surge capacity. You can argue all you want about Cooper. I can't stand the man. I hate the way he approaches things. I think if he just would use a little bit different wording, maybe his points would come across without him sounding like an asshole. But that's not my job to handle. I didn't run for governor. So, forgetting for a moment what I think of Cooper and what I may think of the way they do things, our hospital surge capacity is a real and present factor that will determine what happens in this state with COVID. If our capacity starts to diminish, which means that number keeps going up. Now we're at 50% of capacity. Now we're at 60%. We at 75%. Look at California. They're at 85%. They locked down everything. And I can't remember the exact rules, but like every business closes at 8 p.m. You don't be on the street unless you're grocery shopping, going to work, going home. No, we could be looking at a real possibility for those kinds of mandates to come down if we don't control COVID on our own. We're all responsible adults. We can do this. I'm not saying you got to sacrifice liberties, sacrifice privileges. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. I'm not wearing one most of the time, but when I walk into Food Line, I put a mask on because there's a bunch of older elderly people I don't know. If I see someone that looks like they have ever had cancer, for example, and but when I see a person that may be on chemo, I will turn and walk the other direction because I know I'm healthy, but maybe I'm carrying it, maybe I'm not. But I know their system is incredibly immunocompromised, and I don't want them to catch the common cold from me. Sure as hell don't want them to catch COVID. So wear your mask where you need to. Don't wear it where you don't need to. I don't care. You shouldn't care. But you should be cognizant of the fact that if people continue to get sick and COVID hits a certain point in our state where The medical professionals, the hospitals, the doctors are telling the state, we don't have beds. We're treating patients in hallways. Our doctors are working 60-hour shifts straight through with 2 5-hour energy drinks in between. They're falling over exhausted and sleeping in, janitor closets to get 4 hours of rest between shifts. If it gets that bad, there will be no choice. The lockdowns that we get hit with will be massively worse than anything we've seen before. And at that point, I kind of lose the ability to argue with them. If hospitals are full and we don't have any more doctors and we don't have any more nurses, there's going to be a change. And it's not going to be one that most of us like. So Christmas is going to be worse. Thanksgiving was worse. And because Thanksgiving was worse, the numbers that we're dealing with now in the 1st of December, for example, in the 1st of November, there were only 2,200 people in the hospital. So let's say there were, 10,000 people running around with COVID that weren't in the hospital. Well, if the numbers doubled for December, now there's 5,000 in the hospital, that means there's 20,000 running around with COVID that may be asymptomatic or just don't know they have it yet. So the numbers are going to continue to spike because of the numbers that we're at now. It just grew by 100%. It means it's going to grow by 100% again unless we take some pretty extraordinary efforts to be smart. Use sanitizer, wash your hands often, stay away from people you don't know. I hang out with all my friends. None of us wear masks. It's the same people I've been hanging out with for years. We hang around, we hug, we kiss, we shake hands, we share drinks. We got, my cootie group is the same one it has been all year long. We have a great time. I don't feel like my privileges are being squashed or impinged upon. I don't get to see my mom as much, and that sucks. I talk to her on Facebook. I talk to her on Marco Polo. We chat back and forth. I've got to hug her neck about 5 times now since February, and I'll be glad when that can be better. But I don't want my mom getting sick. Hospital surge capacity is going to be, in my opinion, the driving factor that decides what this state does. It's not going to be what I want, what you want, what anybody else wants. It's going to be what the hospitals are experiencing that drives the reaction the governor's office and the DHHS and Dr. Cohen send out to us. Do what you can. Stay safe. Keep the numbers low as best you know how. And bear with the people that work in the medical community that are trying to get through this. You guys think you're exhausted? You have no idea. Our doctors and nurses are working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. They're working in conditions that they're not familiar with. They're being forced to go back and do things that they never planned for in their career path. Our entire state did not intend to have its entire hospital staff dealing with a communicable disease like this. That wasn't their dream goal. That's just the reality they wound up facing. And they've learned on the fly. They've re-educated themselves on the fly. They're doing the best they can to serve everybody in the capacity that they can. Be thankful for them and try to remember that if their job gets worse at a certain point, it's going to be damn near martial law in North Carolina. And California's already seeing it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, California can fall off the face of the map and the United States would be a little bit better off. But they are a good example of what can happen here if we don't get a hold on this ourselves. You don't like Cooper? Fine. I don't like Cooper. I didn't vote for him. I was kind of hoping he'd get kicked out, but he didn't. So he's here. And whether you like his measures or not, he's got the legal authority to enact them. And he's going to enact much more strict ones if we don't act like adults ourselves and keep these numbers down. We have the ability. We're all smart people. We're all adults. We can do this. I've traveled the entire state and multiple states for an entire year throughout COVID. I've never gotten sick. I've never gotten anybody sick. Knock on wood, it could happen tomorrow. But we have the ability to keep these numbers down ourselves. Just do it. That's all I can say. I talked longer than I intended to. Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you have a good Christmas. I hope between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you'll act like adults and use some sense and try to keep this thing from spreading as best you can. Have a good holidays, y'all. Merry Christmas.